Thank you guys so much for letting me come. So, this is a long passage, but specifically the second story is one that's really meaningful to me. Like Maylene mentioned to you guys. So my wife and I had a little girl who was born at full term at about 40 weeks, but had passed away just before she was born. So she just got wrapped up in the cord, and when they're little like that, it really doesn't take very long for the blood and oxygen to be cut off before they pass away. So, a story about a dad having a little girl who has died is really powerful and meaningful to me. So I appreciate you guys letting me come and share a little bit about this. So a couple things, maybe just to let me share a couple things before we come into this story. Let me just share just a little bit about my own story and kind of where we got to before that, to just give you a little bit of background on my life. And my parents are both Christians. My mom, though, actually, she came from a home where her parents were not Christians. And when she was a university student, she was actually big into partying. She'd always be like the one out drinking and that kind of thing. But one of her friends, her second year at university, became a Christian, and my mom started to see her life really change, and just thought, wow, my friend is completely different, and she has joy and peace and things that she didn't have before. So my mom became a Christian shortly after that. So I had the privilege of growing up in a family where my parents told me about God all the time. But it was really in high school for me when I decided, this is something that I want for myself. So I played sports in high school, and one of my coaches, when I played football, was a strong, committed Christian. And I don't know if you guys have watched a lot of American football games. It's the same for a lot of coaches in a lot of sports. Coaches like to yell and scream at people and curse at people and humiliate people and that kind of thing. And a lot of my coaches were that way. But this one coach was not that way. He was really different. He was very patient. He just had a joy in his life that if we were playing well, that's fine. If we weren't playing well, it wasn't the end of the world. He expected us to perform and to give it our best, but he didn't scream at us and humiliate us when we did something wrong. And the more I got to know him, I just started asking, why are you that way? He said, well, it's because I'm a Christian. That means that I have a personal relationship with God through Jesus Christ. And so my 10th grade year, my second year of high school, I decided, you know what, I want that for myself, and started to follow Jesus. And so that was a long time ago, over 25 years ago, that I started to follow Jesus. So, but I still, it was a growth process. I went to a really competitive academic high school, so it was the most competitive academic high school in my state. We had, I had classmates who went to Stanford, who went to MIT, Duke, Rice, Yale, so I went to the University of North Carolina, which in terms of public schools, it's one of the best public schools in the country. But I think a lot of my identity, even though I had become a Christian, still a lot of my identity, I found it in, okay, I'm a good athlete, and I have straight A's, and I'm part of student government leadership, and all these things. But I remember my senior year in high school. So a lot of high schools in the U.S. they'll have these things called senior superlatives, and it just means who is most athletic, or who is most popular, who is the handsomest and the prettiest and most likely to succeed, or most likely to go to jail. It's supposed to be funny, but one of the categories was best all around. And one of my good friends was chosen best all around in our senior class, and I just remember feeling so angry. Just thinking I have better grades than this guy. I'm a captain on the football team. He just plays the sport. I played multiple sports. I coach. I'm on student council. Blah blah blah. All these things that I thought I can get my value from my list of accomplishments. But then I realized like these lists of accomplishments leave me feeling empty. They couldn't fill this hole in my heart that I needed, and so it ended up actually driving me further into my relationship with God, because I realized this hole in my heart was made for God to fill, and my list of accomplishments couldn't fill that hole. Excuse me. So, yeah, started and got really involved with the ministry during college, and was pre-med for a long time, but ended up deciding that I wanted to do ministry instead. And there's a longer story to that, but
can you elaborate what ministry means?
Yeah, sure. So I've really enjoyed telling people about Jesus, and was a part of leading a group at my high school, and then later on at my university, of telling my classmates about Jesus, helping them come to know God or grow in their relationship with God. And I just thought, like, this is the most significant thing that I can do. Again, even all the other accomplishments, even if I have this big list of other accomplishments, those things aren't going to make me happy. I just found that God had given me a lot of gifts. Like, I'm naturally outgoing, and I find it easy to make friends. I enjoy making new friends, and just a lot of things that made doing this kind of thing, for my job seem like, well, it kind of made sense. Like maybe there's a reason why God made me this way. So after that, the ministry that I was a part of, some older guys who were maybe a year or two older than me had gone on a short-term trip actually to China to tell students there about Christ, and had seen, even though they have a different cultural background, and even though they've been told, from the time that they were young that there is no God, like God was working in their hearts, and lots of students in China were coming to trust in Jesus and have that personal relationship with God. And so I thought, like, I'll go there and try it out. And so I went for a few weeks one summer and just was amazed. And again, similarly, seeing friends that I was making who had a completely different cultural background from me come to believe, like, okay, yeah, we think that there is a God, and we think that this Jesus person really was God in human form, and who lived the life that we should have lived and died a death that we should have died so that we can have life forever with God. And it was amazing. I couldn't convince people of that. It's a completely different worldview. But again, I just saw friends of mine saying, yeah, I think this is true, and I think I want to follow Jesus too. And so decided, okay, I'll finish my time at university, but I want to come back and do this more. So finished my time at university, and ended up going back over to China and served there for several years, and made lots of friends, and saw some of those friends decide that they wanted to follow Jesus and build their lives around him. And I thought maybe we'll be there our whole lives, but one of my children has some special needs, like she has some learning disabilities, and so we had to come back to the United States in 2011 and just try to help our child get some help. And thankfully, this child is doing much better now. But again, it touched something in me where I think, again, I was building my identity on something that I was doing, thinking, oh God, I'm significant, I'm important for you because I'm going to another country for you to tell other people about you. But then when he brought us back, suddenly this thing that I was building my sense of value on was taken away, and it's like, well, why am I valuable to you, God? Why am I important to you? And just, again, he just reminded me, it's not because of what I do. He loves me because he loves me, period. Um, so yeah, again and again, I just think God has brought a lot of difficulties into our lives, but each time He's used those difficulties to draw us closer to His heart. And so, like I mentioned, my daughter passed away in 2015. I have a child with a disability. My wife has had cancer 2 times in the last 4 years. Life. I think it's really easy. I don't know for you guys within your cultural backgrounds, but I think a lot of times as Americans, we tend to think if we have money and power, then we can kind of insulate ourselves from difficulty. It's like, okay, if I have enough money, then I can buy a nice house and a nice neighborhood.
That's also true in Taiwan.
Yeah.
And most of people will think in this way.
Yeah, well, and I think it's just a common human thing. Like,
I was about to say this, that it's not an American, it's like
The
overall a
human
human.
being
Yeah.
will think like, this will isolate myself from the hardships
yeah,
and the bad things if
Yeah.
I'm powerful.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's a human thing. But I think the thing that God has been showing me is, your money can't insulate you completely from that. Whether you're rich or poor, you can still get cancer. Thankfully, we're able to afford treatment for cancer, and I still have my wife. But there's a good chance that she won't live as long as she would if she didn't have cancer. We don't know. We have to live with that uncertainty. Or, rich or poor, you can still have a child who dies. And even ultimately, rich or poor, none of us can delay our death forever. Right? We all have to face death, and what are we going to do with that? So I think one of the themes of my life that God has just done over and over again, maybe because it takes me, I'm a slow learner, I guess, so maybe it's taking me more time to learn it, but also I think He just wants to draw me close. Is over and over through these difficulties. Each time He's like, Andy, I want to pull you closer. Andy, I want you to know my heart for you. All that, I guess, is a little bit of my story and my context for looking at this story. So a couple things looking at this story. So look at the first paragraph here. So Jesus, He's just done some amazing stuff. We could talk about the demon stuff another time, but Jesus, He goes all over the place and He does these amazing things that any normal human being like you and me, we can't do those things, right? He's showing people something about who He is. He is a man, but He's not just a man. As He makes clear over and over through His teaching, He's not just a man, He's God become human. So Jesus comes over to the other side of the lake, and one of the leaders of the synagogue, that's just like the Jewish religious place where they would gather and they would read from their scriptures and pray to God. So the leader of the synagogue, this man named Jairus, he hears that Jesus is in town, and he comes to Jesus and he says, "Will you please come and heal my daughter? She's dying." So word had spread about who Jesus was and about His power. So obviously that's why Jairus is seeking Jesus. He's not seeking any random person. He knows that Jesus has the ability to heal his daughter. So Jesus goes with him. But, then think about what happens next. So Jesus is going to this man's house, but lots of other people have heard about him, and they've heard about his miracles. So there's a big crowd of people all pressed in together around him, and he's just making slow time. And you think, like, if you're Jairus and your little girl is at death's door, and you're thinking, people, please just get out of the way so He can come and heal my daughter, because she's going to die if He doesn't come soon. And yet, Jesus isn't in a hurry. I think there are a lot of times in life where it's like, God, I have my plan for what I want you to do, but God's not in a hurry. So this woman, who's had bleeding for years and years, for 12 years. And it says, she spent everything that she had on doctors, but she not only not gotten better, her problem had gotten worse. And for this culture, for a woman who has this kind of bleeding, they consider her unclean. So it's not just that she has a medical problem, it's everyone basically cuts off relationship with her because of this. So for 12 years, she's been suffering not only from the medical problem, but also just from isolation. And she knows, she's heard about Jesus too. She knows, I don't even, he doesn't even have to pay attention to me. If I just touch even just the corner of his jacket, then I'll be healed. And sure enough, she touches his clothing and immediately her bleeding stops. Jesus senses it. He recognizes that this has happened. He's like, who touched me? His disciples are all kind of mad. It's like, what do you mean? Like, tons of people are touching you. Everybody's touching you. What do you mean, who touched you? But the woman comes forward and tells Jesus what happened, right? So Jesus has the opportunity right then. He could get mad at her, right? Like, woman, don't you know I'm on an important mission. I'm going to go heal this dying girl. Why did you do that? But instead of saying, oh, you're unclean, why would you touch me? I'm a holy man. Why would you touch me and make me unclean? The opposite happened. It's like, not that Jesus was infected by her uncleanness. She was infected by Jesus' cleanness. So he was a holy man, so holy that his holiness, his cleanness changed her and affected even her physiology. But again, her problem wasn't just the bleeding problem, right? It was also a social problem. So Jesus, knowing that, he stops everything. And she tells everybody, how do they know that this woman's story, she'd been suffering for 12 years? Because she tells them. She tells them the whole story, and she's like, but I've been healed now. And Jesus says, your faith has made you whole. Your faith has healed you, or, your faith has saved you, it says in some translations. But basically, he's saying, you trusted in me, and I'm restoring you. So not only is she healed of her medical issue, but because of that, then she's healed back into relationships with other people. They won't shun her anymore. She won't have to live in shame and isolation apart from everybody. But yeah, inevitably, what happens? During all that time, this little girl who's been in bed, struggling for her last breath, she passes away. And some servants come from Jairus' house, and they say, well, don't trouble Jesus anymore. She's gone. Right? But Jesus overhears them. He says, don't be afraid, just believe. Don't be afraid, just believe. So they go into the house, and I think it's so significant. He doesn't let the whole crowd come in. This is not a miracle for the whole crowd. This is for the mom and the dad, and for just 3 of his closest followers. So they go into the home. In those days, if you had money, when you died or you had someone in your family die, you would hire these professional criers or weepers to let everybody know, oh, it's a big deal that this person died. So they had these professional people who are professional weepers and mourners that they've already hired because she's already dead. But Jesus is like, get out of here. She's not dead. She's just sleeping, which they know what a dead person is, right? So they're like, who is this idiot? Why is he saying that? They laugh at him. But he takes them all outside. He makes them leave. So just Jairus and Jairus' wife, the mom and dad of the kid, and then those 3 disciples, they go into the room where that little girl is, and I don't know if you guys have been in a room with death. It's really quiet. It's really silent. Just over there on the bed, the little girl's body is there. And she's not moving. She's not breathing. Her body's starting to turn cold. But Jesus goes over to her, gently takes her by the hand, and basically says what you would say to somebody to wake them up. Hey, little one, wake up, get up. Like in the morning, I have to help my daughter Emma. She's a teenager. She doesn't wake up, so I have to do a lot more than that. But like basically, just as easily as he's having a little girl wake up. So he said, remember, the child's not dead. The child's sleeping, right? His power is so big. His power is so great. Not just that he can heal a woman who's been suffering from bleeding. He even has power over life and death. And he doesn't have to like say any magic words or like wave his hand like Doctor Strange in the Marvel movies or whatever. Like he just says, hey, little girl, wake up. And she comes out of death back into life. She's a 12-year-old little girl, she's probably hungry. Jesus is like, hey, go give her something to eat. It's not just she's alive. She's a real human being, so she has human needs, so go get her something to eat. But, I think it's interesting, thinking about these parents. Later on they all died, right? So Jairus is dead. This is 2,000 years ago. His wife's dead. The little girl is dead. The little girl's great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren for 20 generations or however many they're dead to, right? Why is this significant, though? As Christians, I don't know how much you guys have studied all of this in terms of the Christian story about Jesus and his biographies. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all four of those biographies of Jesus, the central thing that happens, where they spend the most time focusing, is that he was betrayed and beaten and killed, right? They nailed him up on a cross and he died. But then 3 days later, he came back to life. You think about, like we were just talking about, like the central human problem is we try to use whatever power we have to insulate ourselves from suffering, right? And especially death. Try to put off death as long as we can. Health food, all the health crazy stuff there is in America. Or even, how do I prepare for death? But the Christian hope is that Jesus died and came back to life. And he says, at a different time, he says, anyone who believes in me, even though he dies, he's going to live again. So the Christian hope is that anyone who is a follower of Jesus, we're all going to die. But the good thing is we don't have to be afraid of death because he's already gone in there and he's broken it from the inside. He's busted out of that prison. And so I don't have to be afraid of death because Jesus says, I'm going to give you life again on the other side of it. So for me as a parent, and again, it'd be maybe talk a little bit more about this another time, but I believe even for little children too, I think there's a similar promise that they'll experience God's forgiveness in that new life. So when I think about for my little girl, I have hope, like I'll get to see her again. And even though as a dad, man, I would give every penny I have to just hear her cry or hear her laugh, because we didn't get to hear that because she was stillborn. She'd already died before she was born. But it's a profound hope for me and for my wife that we're going to get to hear her voice and we're going to get to hear her laugh. But also, even more precious than that, we get to be with Jesus, who's the one who gives that to anybody who wants it. That's, there's lots of other ins and outs to our story, but that's a big theme of life that God has been teaching me during my story. And the verses on this other side, they kind of summarize that. So this is Peter, again, one of those three guys that Jesus took with him into that room. So this is Peter writing many decades later. And he's a leader at this point in the church, in the early church. And lots of the people he's writing to are suffering deeply because they're Christians. Like they're being thrown in jail by the Roman government, or their families are throwing them out of the house because they're following Jesus, all these kind of things. So Peter is saying, like, Peter being like a person who cares about them, who's like a mentor to a lot of these people, he's writing them a letter to help give them perspective on when they face difficulties. So he says this: "Dear friends, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal that has come to test you as though something strange were happening to you. But rejoice, inasmuch as you participate in the sufferings of Christ, so that you may be overjoyed when his glory is revealed. If you are insulted because of the name of Christ, you are blessed, for the Spirit of glory and of God rests on you." So basically he's just saying, like, the life of Jesus, think of it like the letter V, okay? So Jesus, on one side of his life, it's about suffering and death. His whole life was like a straight path, straight to the cross. He knew the whole time what his mission was. And even as he's doing these miracles, he's stirring up people who are going to oppose him because they know he's claiming to be God. And you read the biographies, and they're clear that he'd made all kinds of enemies. And he knew what he was doing, because his mission from God was, you're going to be murdered even though you were innocent. You'll be put to death even though you were innocent. So that's the first part of his life, suffering and death. But also, Jesus didn't stay dead, right? So the second significant theme of his life and his story is resurrection and power. So Peter is saying, if someone is a follower of Jesus, that same V-shaped pattern is going to define your life too. There's going to be suffering, there's going to be difficulty, there's going to be even death. He's saying, but just the same as Jesus, there's going to be transformation and hope and resurrection and joy that comes about as a result. So yeah, those are two of my favorite scriptures, and my story interwoven a little bit with Jesus' story.